All right, man, peace. So, brothers, this is going to be my coverage of Michael Jordan's epic documentary of his final Chicago Bulls championship team in 1998, episodes 3 and 4. In episodes 3 and 4, we got some coverage of Mr. Dennis Rodman, the MK Ultra programmed super rebounder, formerly of the Detroit Pistons and the Chicago Bulls, who basically acted as a double agent. He dropped dime on the true motivations of many of the cognoscenti of the Detroit Pistons. Despite the protestations of Mr. Isiah Thomas, Dennis Rodman basically confirmed that Detroit's goal was to injure Michael Jordan, which was very common back then. Those teams that were desperate, they were trying to win by any means necessary, even if it meant permanently injuring the most important player on the other team. The Pistons tried to hurt and or injure Larry Bird. They tried to hurt and or injure Magic Johnson. And they definitely tried to hurt and or injure Michael Jordan. And the players who are always the most likely to try to injure Jordan were Rick Mahorn and Bill Laimbeer, the two dirtiest players in the NBA. And Isiah Thomas was right there with them. It's just that he was able to escape a lot of the scrutiny because he was so super talented. And he also had that cherubic smile, that little fake angelic smile that he had. But either way, episodes 3 and 4 basically chronicled the rise of the Chicago Bulls in the mid to late 1980s and the travails that they had to face, as well as finally being able to overcome the Detroit Pistons, the bad boy Pistons, and taking on Magic Johnson's Lakers in a ritual that was meant to symbolize the handing off of the baton from Magic to Michael. I've stated this before. The NBA really wanted Magic to start playing Jordan in the finals in 88 or 89. That handoff of the baton was supposed to happen back then. The job of the two divine twins, Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, was to bring the NBA to national prominence, while the job of the great prince of the power of the air, Michael Jordan, was to make the NBA global. Well, Isiah Thomas and the bad boy Pistons acted as proverbial flies in the ointment. They were truly an all-time great team. They don't get quite the credit that they deserve because of their tactics, but they had at least 3 or 4 legit Hall of Fame players on their squad. Their backcourt was one of the greatest of all time with Isiah Thomas and Joe Dumars. They had Dennis Rodman, who's a Hall of Famer. In my view, both Adrian Dantley and Mark Aguirre, who replaced Adrian Dantley, should be in the Hall of Fame. I believe Adrian's already in there, but Mark Aguirre should be in there. And believe it or not, Bill Laimbeer should be in the Hall of Fame also. I believe that he was a 4-time All-Star. He was able to win the rebounding title, I think, more than once. And he was a very pivotal and prominent player on those championship teams. He should be in the Hall of Fame. He's not, and he probably never will be, because he's considered the dirtiest player to ever play. And that's what Jordan had to go up against. They tested the Bulls physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And that's the reason why they were able to win 6 championships, because the Pistons prepped them. They were like that rough and tough older brother who always beat the shit out of the younger brother. And when the younger brother finally came of age, nothing really bothered him because of how he was raised. That's what the Pistons were to the Bulls. But anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
So Shannon, what was your biggest takeaway from what you saw from these episodes?
I was listening very intently, and I made sure there was a calm all over the land. As a matter of fact, I went outside and I said, I don't want to hear a word. I don't want to hear nothing, no horns, no nothing, because I wanted to make sure I was hearing what I heard. You mean to tell me Michael Jordan needed teammates? That Phil Jackson had to instruct in Game 5, the clinching game. He comes to the sideline and he's talking. Michael, who's open? John, well, get him the ball.
That's a renowned story. And that's the reason why Michael Jordan eventually came to love Phil Jackson, because Phil Jackson reminded him of his father. Phil Jackson was not afraid to tell Michael Jordan, calm your ass down and shut the fuck up. And all great players respect coaches who are able and willing to stand up to them. It's the reason why Ty Lue was able to have success with LeBron James, because he was able to tell LeBron James that. Michael Jordan, even though he liked Doug Collins because Doug Collins basically gave him the basketball and said, do what you want, He never truly respected Doug. Michael had no choice but to respect Phil Jackson, a person who had a degree in psychology. Of course he would, because he's a trained handler. But Phil Jackson knew that the main hurdle that was stopping the Bulls from being able to win multiple championships was Michael Jordan taking his phenomenal talent and using it to empower others. Once Jordan figured that out, the sky was the limit.
And he started passing John Paxson the ball. What? He started making the right play. Instead of him trying to go one-on-one like everybody instructs.
You mean 1-on-5? The problem was never when Michael Jordan went 1-on-1. The problems happened when he tried to go 1-on-3, 1-on-4, or 1-on-5.
Because I've heard this, Jenny, and I know you've heard this issue with a little bitty girl. Michael Jordan would have took that shot. Michael Jordan would have took the game over. But if you notice, when he was a solo act, he wasn't jack. It wasn't until he...
Shannon was about to say he wasn't shit.
started getting Scottie Pippen involved, John Paxson involved. Did you know John Paxson, Skip, he was 9 or 12 in that game 5, had 20 points.
John Paxson was extraordinary. For about a 2-year stretch, I'm not quite sure if John Paxson missed a mid-range jump shot, and I'm dead serious about that. People who remember that era will tell you there was about a 2-year stretch from 1990 to 1992 where John Paxson didn't miss a mid-range jump shot. I'm dead serious about that shit. He and Jordan in the 1990-91 season, their first championship season, both shot well over 50% from the field. They had to have been, honestly, they had to have been the most proficient backcourt in the history of the NBA. I'm not quite sure if there's ever been another backcourt who, for a 2-year stretch, both players took that many shots and shot that high over 50%.
Because Skip Bayless, when LeBron James makes the right play, they miss. Oh, you got to take that shot. But see, Skip, I've been telling you this, and I tell everybody this. You make the right play, and you live with the results. You cannot make plays based on how you think it's going to turn out, because you'll be second-guessing yourself all night long. I am so glad. I am so forever grateful that this came out, because it puts the rest. Because
it came out. Shannon Sharpe, this has been known for decades, that Phil Jackson took Michael Jordan aside and said, Michael, who's open? Like, this is not anything new. As a matter of fact, before Phil Jackson's first season coaching the Bulls in 1989, he took Michael Jordan aside and said, I don't want you to try to win the scoring title this year. And Michael Jordan just looked at him with a blank expression on his face. Because Michael had no trust in his teammates. But that first season, the Bulls won 55 games. Phil Jackson's impact was visceral early. The only thing was he had to convince Michael to lower that scoring average down from the 37, 35 range to around that 30 range that it would become known as in the 90s. But that first season, the 89-90 season, Jordan was bucking up against it because he didn't trust his teammates. So he averaged over 33 points per game, but the Bulls were unable to win the championship. The next year, Jordan lowered his scoring average down to around 31.5 points per game, took less shots, but his shooting percentage went up. I think that was his highest ever shooting percentage as an individual. The first year they won the championship, he shot almost 54% from the field at shooting guard, taking 22 shots a game.
Skip Bayless has been telling people for 15 years, Michael told Steve Kerr he was going to pass him the ball, and that's why he did that. No, what I saw in Game 5 against the Lakers in 91, it was Phil Jackson. Michael, because he didn't call him Mike, he called him Michael. Who's open? And he over on the sideline with his head down. John, get him the ball.
So you saying Michael was there like a damn slave? John's open, Massel.
Oh, we've got to get that guy the ball. Move the ball. Huh. What? Skip, did you hear that too? Because I don't know. If you didn't hear it, I got my guy on Roy on standby. I told him Skip Bayless might need a TV. And he says he has a 55-inch or an LED waiting for you. All I got to do is give him the green light. So if your TV wasn't working and you couldn't hear and see what was transpiring last night, I hit him on the phone and he'll be there by noon today. Just let me know.
I hope you're finished, because I am about to unleash on every last word you just said.
Unleash on him, Skip.
Yes, you're right. That was Game 5, which became the closeout game of the Showtime Lakers. The Bulls were up 3-1 because of Michael Jeffrey Jordan on his way to becoming the MVP of that, his first NBA Finals victory.
And that was probably Jordan's best all-around performance. Even though in 1993 he averaged something like over 41 points a game against Phoenix, his performance against the Lakers in 91 was probably his most well-rounded performance. He averaged something like 31 points and 11 assists, something that still has never been done by anyone else.
First MVP, and he went 6 for 6 in that category. So the point was, they did lose Game 1 back.
And the best thing about that series, when Michael Jordan did what he did, was that he did it organically. It wasn't like he was looking at the record books and saw, oh, Oscar Robertson did this or Jerry West did it. Let me do it better than them. You know, like your boy LeBron James likes to do, Shannon Sharp. He likes to look at things that other players have done and then basically try to stat pad his way to doing better than that other player just so that people could say he did it. That's how pathetic that dude is.
Back at Old Chicago Stadium, I was there for the first game. I was sitting at courtside, so I know what happened. Sam Perkins made a big 3, and it was a big upset. But you could see
that Game 1 between the Bulls and the Lakers in 91 was one of the best overall basketball games that I've ever seen. The intensity from start to finish, the greatness of the players on the court, Magic and Worthy against Jordan and Pippen, I mean, it was phenomenal. Magic just showed you how dominant he was overall in controlling the game.
All day long that the Bulls were just better because Jordan was by far the best player on the floor. He absolutely destroyed the Lakers and their confidence in Game 2. And then in Game...
Very true. Jordan hit 13 straight shots, and he just totally, he disemboweled the Lakers. He was so dominant that you could see Magic Johnson was in awe of him, especially after he made that move.
2-3, and then in Game 4, and now we came to Game 5. I was also there at courtside. I wasn't in the forum. You couldn't sit courtside if you were in the media. You had to sit about halfway up. But I was right behind Chick Hearn, the great Lakers broadcaster, and I watched what was happening, Shannon Sharp. The Lakers were triple teaming Michael Jordan because they knew they didn't have a prayer unless they just sold out on defense and said, everybody attack Jordan.
I'm not quite sure if the Lakers were triple teaming Michael Jordan in Game 5, but they were at the very least double teaming him, and it was time for him to move the damn basketball. Jordan was great down the stretch of the fourth quarter in that last game, that closeout game. But what happened was the Lakers saw what he was doing, and they said, you know what, let's double team him. If need be, we'll triple team him, we'll trap him in spots, and make him move the basketball. That's when John Paxson, just started to become a mid-range assassin. He was incredible. Once again, there was a 2-season stretch where John Paxson didn't miss a mid-range jump shot.
The way the Pistons had tried to attack Michael Jordan. And early in the game, we're not talking about for the last shot, we're talking about in the first quarter, we got to see the video of Phil saying, Michael, who's going to be open? John. Well, obviously, they were not guarding John Paxson, who was a very good shooter, very good stand-still, catch-and-shoot jump shooter. And so Michael said, okay.
Very good is an understatement. And it was in the fourth quarter that Phil Jackson was telling Michael Jordan, Michael, who's open? He had to embarrass Michael in front of the rest of the team to help Michael understand you cannot revert to Michael Jordan, 1986, shoot every shot Michael Jordan. Could that win us the game? Yes, maybe, but that's not what's going to establish us as a dynastic team. We have to create a new paradigm for play here. if we're going to be successful consistently.
Okay, I'll give it a try. And John made his first jumper. And then he said, okay, I'll give it another try. And he made his second one. And Michael said, okay, he's got a hot hand. I'll feed him. And they tripled Michael, and he kept feeding John Paxson. They weren't three-point shots. They were two-point jump shots. I'm talking about wide open, 18-foot, oh, you're really going to let me have this kind of jump shots. And he kept catching it, going up, and shooting the equivalent of free throws. And he made 9 of them, and he scored 20 points. And it was the difference in a game that wound up 108-101 Bulls. It wasn't even really close. It was, in the end, they just pulled it.
Not really true. That game was very, very competitive until about 4 minutes left, 3 minutes left. And then the Bulls pulled away, and the Lakers basically waved the white flag.
Away pretty easily because Jordan scored 30 and Paxson scored 20. So I have no idea why you're trying to make...
I think Pippen also had 30 in that game. He had 29 or 30 in that game. Pippen was great that entire series.
Make such a big deal out of that. And my biggest takeaway, to your point, was I still haven't gotten over the fact that a guy I know very well, in fact, I consider Doug Collins a friend of mine. And when he coached Michael for those first 3 years after Stan Albeck, his whole idea was, I've got the best player on the planet. The classic, the money quote last night was my man sitting there saying, Doug Collins saying, gee, do you realize I'm coaching a guy who's the MVP of the league? He's the MVP of the All-Star game.
Doug Collins was basically Michael Jordan's version of Mike D'Antoni. Doug Collins came in and he basically picked up where Kevin Lockery and Stan Albeck left off, which was just give the ball to Michael and get the hell out the way, which Doug Collins himself said explicitly in the aftermath of the Bulls defeating the Bad Boy Pistons in Game 3 of the '89 Eastern Conference Finals. Just give the ball to Michael, everybody else get the fuck out the way. Well, you know what? That's cute. And that caters to Michael's humongous ego. But that's not what's going to win championships. People always ask, why do you say that Jordan is the greatest player ever? He does not hold any individual statistical records. You have to understand what Michael Jordan did was change the paradigm for winning in the NBA. No shooting guard had ever led his team to multiple championships in that way like he did. Oscar Robertson failed all throughout the 60s. He barely made the playoffs certain years. He had to go team up with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, then known as Lou Alcindor, and diminish himself in his role in order to win a championship. Jerry West basically had to wait until, 1972 to win one championship, and he had to diminish his stats as well. Jordan was the first player since Kareem to lead the league in scoring and win a championship, and he did it as shooting guard. Of course, Kareem was a center. So no player had ever done that before. And the paradigm that Jordan has created basically has become the new NBA paradigm. Outside of Shaq and Hakeem, there have not been that many dominant big men to lead their teams to championships since Jordan. You could throw in Tim Duncan also. Tim Duncan, Shaq, and Hakeem, 3 players who are on my all-time top 10 list. Other than that, we've seen it be Jordan and LeBron, Kobe, Kawhi, Steph and KD, Dwayne Wade, all wings, based on the style that Jordan invented. Dominate on the wing, dominate on the top of the key or at the top of the key, post up, in the mid post, slash, get free throws, so on and so forth. That style was basically brought to prominence by Jordan.
He's the defensive player of the year, and he's the slam dunk champ twice in a row. And
he was also, I believe, the All-Star Game MVP in 1988. 1988, the 87-88 season is the perfect season individually. No player has ever had a better season statistically, individually, than Michael Jordan in 1988. With all the things that he was able to accomplish individually. Winning the scoring title, averaging 35 points per game, shooting 53.5% from the field, I believe he led the league in steals. He was the Defensive Player of the Year. That was his second straight season of having over 200 steals and 100 blocks. He won the All-Star Game MVP. He won the slam dunk contest. I mean, the only other thing that he could have done was sold popcorn and parked the damn cars in the parking lot.
Doug is saying, what am I supposed to do? I'm just going to get him the basketball, and I want everybody else to get out of the way. And that's what was happening. And if Michael had grown up under Doug and gotten to the point where the great Tim...
I would love to have seen Skip Bayless be Michael Jordan's coach. The game plan. Skip Bayless is like, all you other bastards, just stay on the bench and sit down. Michael, go out there and go 1-on-5. And then look at Skip drawing up the play on the whiteboard. He got the magic marker and squeaking. They look at the whiteboard. They look at the whiteboard. It just says, I love you, MJ, heart, heart, heart. Michael's going to look at Skip and say, good call, coach. After the game, go up to Jerry Krause and say, you know, fire this dude, please. Get rid of this motherfucker.
Over, his trainer had said, we need to put on 15 pounds of muscle. I believe Doug Collins could have coached Michael and the Bulls to at least as much success.
Totally disagree. Doug Collins is not a championship level coach. Championship level coaches have a different level of psychological manipulation and emotional stability. That's what separates them from the good head coaches. Good head coaches can have great X's and O's. But the difference between a Doug Collins and a Phil Jackson, or a Doug Collins and a Pat Riley, or a Doug Collins and a Popovich, is that those type of coaches can dominate their players psychologically. And Doug Collins could never do that because he himself was never in control over his emotions. That's what got him ran out of Chicago.
As Phil Jackson did. Phil's got a little bit of snakery in him too, so he realized...
Not a little bit, a lot of bit. Phil Jackson definitely has a lot of serpent in him.
That if he bonded with Tex Winter and he kissed up to Jerry Krause, maybe he could sort of snake the job out from under Doug Collins. And he did.
Well, Doug basically alluded to that in the documentary. Remember, Doug said, I thought to myself somewhere in the middle of 1988 that Phil could do this job. What he really meant was that somewhere in 1988 he saw that Phil was going to end up taking his job. And Doug, you know, he wears his heart on his sleeve, so he probably mentioned it a few times.
And he went on to install the triangle, which is a bunch of hocus pocus. In the end...
No, the triangle was exactly what they needed. Because subconsciously, what it did was it created a framework for their monarch athletes to adhere to, similar to a Kabbalistic tree of life or any other type of totemic shape that's used in the MK Ultra program as a trigger. And for the other players, it provided structure for them to know where to stand when Michael or Scottie had the ball and how to move without the ball. That's what made the triangle so pivotal and so important to those championship teams. It gave that team structure.
All those Bulls team, when it came push to shove, there's no triangle. The triangle is the devil's triangle. It's Michael Jordan. It's like, give him the...
Hey, Skip, you might be on to something. He said the triangle is the devil's triangle. You might be on to something. Remember in the documentary, Phil Jackson said that in the triangle, you have 33 options. You notice that? Phil Jackson or Tex Winter said that.
The ball and you guys are done. You're dead because he's going to score it every time. And all I got to leave you with is this. Under Phil Jackson, what happened in the very last game that Michael Jordan played as a Chicago Bull? It was Game 6 at Utah. He scored 45 points. The rest of the team scored.
I would have liked to have gotten some audio on what was being said in the huddle. You know, at that 41.3 second mark, right before, you know, Jordan and the Bulls go back out there on the floor and they give Jordan the ball and he gets the layup and then comes down, gets the steal and then comes down and shoots the jump shot. I would have liked to have heard what transpired in the huddle right before that sequence. Unfortunately, we never got that in the documentary.
Scored 42 points. Scottie scored 8. And Scottie was wide open on the wing for the last shot of the game. I'm open. I'm open. And Michael gives him...
Hey, yo, why Skip Bayless always got to clown Scotty like that? I'm open. You heard Scotty on the documentary. The dude asked Scotty, what were you thinking when Michael was bringing the ball up? Scotty said, get the hell out the way. That's all I was thinking, get the hell out the way.
One little glance like, stop it. And he goes up and holds the pose on Brian Russell, and you know the rest of the story. That team it started with Michael Jordan, and it ended with Michael Jordan, so I appreciate you bringing all that up.
Skip, I'm not so sure Skip had...
Hey, yo, Skip gets so emotional whenever the conversation gets to Jordan or Tom Brady. It's hilarious, man. It's almost as bad as Shannon with LeBron.
And Michael remained a solo act. They would have won the title, Skip, because the other players all of a sudden started to feel like they're involved once Phil came along. You hear them talk about how Scotty went to the next level. Other guys started contributing more because Michael had no choice, because Phil was forcing Michael, you've got to trust these guys. And if you don't trust them when you need them, they're not going to be able to be there for you. So he had to develop a trust. Now, I think he always had somewhat of a trust in Scotty because he saw Scotty the way Scotty was in practice. Scotty could guard all the positions. He
didn't always have trust in Scotty. I think that he looked at Scotty as a stock to invest in because he saw the potential in Scotty. Trust and potential are two very, very different things. I don't think that Michael trusted Scotty until maybe the 91 playoffs. Around the 91 playoffs is when Michael started to trust Scotty and his other teammates. But prior to that, he saw Scotty as a project to work on.
Yeah, obviously, Skip, because he was equal to Michael. He was a little taller and a little longer. So he and Scotty playing passing lanes, man, it was hard to get the ball up the court. Skip, you remember in game one, in which the Lakers won that game, is that Magic had a triple-double. Then they put Scotty on it. Scotty was picking up Magic Johnson. No question about it.
Right, but Magic Johnson basically put up the same stats for the entire series. So this notion that Shannon Sharpe constantly mentions that Magic lit up Michael for a triple-double. Magic Johnson is 6'9", 235, in 1991. He's going to get a triple-double on basically everybody. It's not difficult for him to get 10 rebounds. He's 6'9". He's the greatest passer ever, so he's going to get 10 assists. And his offensive skill set, basically by 1991, by around 86, Magic could do everything offensively in the half court. So it's not that difficult to get a triple-double. It's not like Jordan got lit up by Magic. Magic dominated the floor game. And in game one, he dominated the game. He dominated the game in other games. They just didn't win because the Bulls were the better team.
The greatest point guard of all time, 94 feet. What player Skip, is going to pick up another player? Ain't nobody picking up James Harden 94 feet. Ain't nobody.
You could pick up James Harden 94 feet if they allowed 1990s rules. I promise you, under 90s rules, if a great defensive perimeter player were to pick up James Harden 94 feet, he'd get very frustrated.
Picking up Steph Curry for an entire game.
I could see Marcus Smart picking up Steph Curry or James Harden 94 feet for the game if that's what he was told he had to do for them to win a game.
And for the remainder of the series, 94 feet. But that's what Scotty did. And if that really changed the series, Skip. And when you look at it, yes, Michael, 88, 89, and 90. They got beat by the Pistons. And guess what happened, Skip? They lost 4-1 in the second round. And Michael had all those accolades. He was regular season MVP, All-Star Game MVP, dunk champion, defensive player of the year. And spanked it. Put it right over his leg and spanked it. Got it right on up out the playoffs. So in other words, because what you do here is that when Mike Miller have an outstanding game. Oh, Mike Miller had 20 points. Look at what Mike did. LeBron James was an afterthought. Mario Chambers had 22 points. LeBron James was an afterthought. And lo and behold, all the all-time great players have teammates. And you ask your teammates sometimes.
No player is going to win a championship without heavy contribution from all of the teammates. I'm not quite sure if Skip Bayless has ever said that guys win championships by themselves, even though he does make a lot of hyperbolic statements pertaining to Jordan, so maybe he has said that. But I think that even he understands that Jordan needed his teammates to win. You cannot win an NBA championship without stellar play from your teammates. It's just not possible.
To do their job. Well, John Paxson was the starting point guard on that team for those reasons.
Well, Paxson was the starting off guard. In the triangle offense, you don't really have a point guard per se. They just pick someone who's a great distributor to distribute. So in the case of the Bulls, it was Scottie Pippen. What made Paxson such a great fit with Jordan was that he could hit wide open jump shots. He didn't demand the ball. He did not need to have the ball off the dribble. He could score without the basketball. And he just played his part. He played his role.
Wins. That's what he was, wasn't he, Skip Bayless? John Paxson was the starting point guard on those teams. He was a damn good player. Skip, I'm not saying he was a Hall of Famer. I'm not saying he was an all-star. But he was very good for what they asked him to do. And there are a lot of teams that's like that you have to have a guy that, although he's not heralded, he's not.
John Paxson was almost like a Caucasian version of Derek Fisher, except Paxson was a far better natural jump shooter and nowhere near as good a natural athlete as Fisher was. But they played a similar role.
Not going to be an all-NBA or all-star, but he holds it together. And that's what John Paxson, because not only did he do Game 5, Skip, you remember what he did when Horace Grant passed in that ball, right, Skip Bayless? You remember, right? You remember what he did, Skip, right?
Well, keep in mind, by 1993, John Paxson was not the starter. He was playing the Steve Kerr role by 1993. And maybe not even that, because I think that Trent Tucker was more playing that role. John Paxson had a degenerative knee issue, and he really should have retired after 93. But he was the starter in 91 and 92, and those are probably the two best teams. I mean, one can make the case of the 6 Bulls championships, the 91 and 92 team were the most athletic and maybe the hungriest overall. The 96 team, of course, was right there, but Paxson was not starting by 93. B.J. Armstrong was starting.
You remember that game when he shot? Don't pretend you don't remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Don't pretend you don't remember.
I was there in 98 for every game, so I do know what happened. I covered the Bulls in 98 for the Chicago Tribune. John Paxson wasn't the point guard. He was just a shooter. That's all he was. He was an extra body. He was
Skip. Early.
They were interchangeable.
Early.
You know, I got it, but he was not
early.
The point guard.
Like the 91 93.
Okay. I know. I'm with you. So the point was that Michael ended up being the point guard, and Michael was the best defender on that team. And I know Scottie played point.
Absolutely. Michael Jordan was the best defender on that team, and it's hilarious that Shannon's trying to make the case that it was Scottie. The reason why Scottie got so many of the toughest assignments, quote unquote, is because Scottie was not the person who they depended on to score on the offensive end. Scottie would have games in the playoffs where he would score 9-10 points, but nobody cared because Jordan scored 37. Jordan also played stellar defense, and the focus was totally on him. If Scottie had an 8-point game, a 10-point game in the playoffs, nobody cared as long as he guarded his man and made great plays in the overall floor game. Scottie was heavily impactful in the overall floor game, especially in the late 90s. Now, in the early 90s, he was expected to score more. But was he as great a defensive player as Michael Jordan overall? No, he was not. Jordan, when he locked in, was the best defensive player in the NBA. Scottie was up there, but was he Jordan? No.
Forward, and I give you, Scottie took Magic in the finals just because of the matchups. It worked. But if you had asked Michael to take Magic, Michael would have taken him and taken him out of the series just.
To Skip's point, and I'm sure that Shannon does not know this, Michael Jordan guarded Magic Johnson more than Scottie Pippen did over the course of that series, and Michael Jordan's defensive metrics against Magic Johnson were better than Scottie Pippen's defensive metrics were against Magic Johnson over the course of that series. But you could look at Shannon's face, and you could tell by the incredulous look that he has on his face that he's going to go along with the narrative because he has not done the research.
The same way. It just worked out. Scottie, who was a very good defender. Trust me on this. If they had needed Michael to neutralize Magic, he would have neutralized him. And the point was that Scottie did give them a second defender, but he was not better than Michael. Michael was the defensive player of the year. Scottie
Agreed.
was never a defensive player of the year.
And that's just facts.
Now, let's look at the bigger picture of what Michael did for that franchise. Last night was a lot of...
And not to go there, not to pick on Scottie, but there were just not that many great small forwards in the NBA in that era who really could score. But the few that there were would normally give Scottie, they would give Scottie buckets. Jamal Mashburn scored 50 points on Scottie Pippen one time in the mid-90s. Glenn Big Dog Robinson will give Scottie Pippen huge numbers. Grant Hill used to cross up Scottie all the time. There were not that many great scoring small forwards in the 1990s, but the few that there were would give Scottie Pippen hell. Scottie's job was to do his best on defense. Scottie was tenacious, he was highly intelligent, and he would always put his best foot forward. And he was willing to get lit up. That's what it means to be a great defender in the NBA. You're going to get lit up. Michael Jordan, as great a defender as he was, he would get taken to school sometimes by Mitch Richmond, Clyde Drexler. That's just a part of it. These guys get paid also. There's a reason why they're averaging 25, 27 points a game per season. You're not just going to stop them. Bernard King used to give them major buckets even after the knee injury when he came back with the Bullets.
About the Pistons and about Dennis Rodman. Rodman was obviously a Piston for a while and was just haunted the Bulls as a physical presence. And then Jordan welcomed him, as did Phil, onto the Bulls. And yet, it wasn't Phil who coached Rodman. It was Michael who kept him in bounds.
Michael basically was the teacher. Phil was the principal. The reason why the Rodman and Jordan dynamic works so well is because Rodman was in awe of Jordan from his days in Detroit. Even though they looked on Jordan with disdain, they understood that it was going to take a team effort to just stop him. And he was the only guy in the NBA like that. So they were in awe of him. So Rodman brought a lot of that awe over with him to Chicago. And then on top of that, with the way in which his relationship with the Detroit Pistons franchise fell apart after he felt like he was betrayed by a lot of his teammates trying to sleep with his woman, and the way in which Chuck Daly was released. And then he goes to San Antonio and is playing with a star player in David Robinson, who was soft and was not an alpha and was not going to lead them to a championship, because Rodman knew what it took to win a championship in the NBA. He knew what it took within the best player to be the guy to lead a team to a championship. You had to be a straight dog. And David Robinson was not a dog. He was extremely talented. He was physical, but he was not an alpha. There were other players who had more of that alpha in them. Karl Malone, Charles Barkley had more of the alpha than David Robinson, and they did not have the natural physique that David Robinson had. Malone had been able to build up his physique. But, you know, the striations and the definition of a David Robinson, like, he looked like he was made in a laboratory, and maybe he was. Who the hell knows? But Rodman saw Robinson as a player who always was going to falter in the second or third round of the playoffs because he was not mentally strong enough. In Jordan, he saw the alpha. He knew that Jordan was of the same ilk, the same caliber of an Isaiah Thomas, a Larry Bird, a Magic Johnson, all the players who Rodman had competed against in the Eastern Conference Finals or the finals throughout the 80s. So he knew what the deal was. He naturally respected Jordan because of that mental makeup that he had.
And again, the big story that I knew, so none of this was shocking to me, but the nation got to see it last night, was that at one point, 97-98, after Scottie came back from his off-season surgery, which he had just before the season, he missed almost like half the season, Dennis got a little upset. He felt like he'd fallen to the third wheel after he'd played very well for a stretch without Scottie. And he asked Phil, could I take a couple of days off and go to Vegas?
Once again, the best thing that ever happened in Scottie Pippen's legacy in his career is that he was not traded to the Seattle Supersonics in 1998. Because had he been traded to the Supersonics, the Bulls would have still won the championship without him. The Chicago Bulls, at one point in that season, were like 7 wins, 8 losses, or 8 wins, 9 losses, something like that. And that was when Scottie decided that he was going to demand a trade and he was going to sit out the whole season and, kind of try to flex his muscles. When the Bulls started winning, eventually getting to 24-11, that's when Scottie said, okay, I'm ready to come back, because his stock was dropping so precipitously. He had to get back, just so that he could fill his slot again. And that's when Rodman got depressed, because he was getting accustomed to being Jordan's sidekick as opposed to being the third wheel.
So Phil asked Michael, which is interesting, will you sign off on this? And Michael didn't like it, but he said, if it's 48 hours, I'll accept it, but he won't be back in 48 hours. Well, he was, what they didn't actually point out last night in the documentary, Dennis actually came back from Las Vegas in 48 hours. It wasn't that Michael had to fly to Vegas to get him. He actually had 2 apartments in Chicago, one near the Berto Center up in Deerfield where they practiced, and one near the United Center downtown. And Michael had to go to that apartment downtown and knock on the door because Dennis just didn't feel like yet coming back to the Bulls. And I believe there was a Carmen Electra sighting there. At least that's what she said.
Yes.
It was always something with Dennis.
Dennis Rodman had one of the assistant trainers with the Bulls assigned to follow him around wherever he went, whenever Phil would allow him to go on these excursions to Vegas. And the trainer would report that Rodman would party until 3:30 in the morning, get maybe an hour of sleep to 2 hours of sleep, get up, work out for 2 or 3 hours a day, and then stay up the whole day and do the same thing over again. Go out and party all the way till 3:30 in the morning, get an hour or 2 hours of sleep, sometimes no sleep, work out for 2 or 3 hours in the morning, and then do the same thing over and over again. The dude was a nut job. He was so bad, even Jordan looked at him and said, you're not going to live to see 40 years old. And Jordan was known for doing things similar to that. Jordan would do basically the same thing. Play the game, go hang out, play cards. But the only difference was Jordan would get maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep. He looked at Rodman only getting an hour and said, wow, this guy, he's a nut.
But it was up to Michael to keep Dennis in check, and he did, because Dennis Rodman was scared of Michael Jordan. So when Michael came down hard on Dennis, Dennis took it from Michael in ways he wouldn't take it from Phil or from anybody who ever coached him back to...
Absolutely. The only people that basically Dennis Rodman would ever take chastisement from were Chuck Daly, Isaiah Thomas, Michael Jordan, and Phil Jackson. Even though Skip is saying that, Phil Jackson couldn't say anything to Dennis, yes, he could.
Southeastern Oklahoma. So it was magical what Michael did with Dennis through that run and those 3 championships, the second half of his run in Chicago.
Well, Skip, let me tell you how Michael neutralized Magic in the first game. He neutralized Magic so much in the first game, Magic put a triple-double on him, and the Lakers won the game, which was the...
Big damn deal. And the Lakers won the game in the last second because Sam Perkins hit a wide-open 3-point shot. And the real reason why the Bulls lost that first game is because Jordan had a jump shot that lipped out near the end of the game. I mean, give me a break, Shannon.
Only game they won. And from that point on, Phil put Scottie Pippen on.
Lies. The majority of the defensive assignment to Magic Johnson was led by Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan guarded Magic Johnson the majority of the time for the remainder of that series. This notion that it was Scottie Pippen is a lie. Scottie guarded Magic for the majority of the time in Game 2. But throughout Games 3, 4, and 5, and you can look at it yourself, it was Michael Jordan who was guarding Magic Johnson.
On Magic Johnson, and we know the outcome. Second, Skip, Dennis Rodman out of his mind. Skip, you cover football a lot longer than you cover basketball.
That's an understatement that Dennis Rodman is out of his mind.
You know there's no way in hell that a player can go to a head coach and say, man, I need a vacation. In the middle of the season, and say, man, I need me a vacation, man. Hey, I need 40
Like Young Jeezy said, I need a vacation.
hours. I need something. Man, that coach will say, man, if you don't get your you-know-what out my office, Skip Bayless, there is no way in hell.
Exceptions are made for exceptional people.
I don't care how player-friendly he is, and I don't care who the player is. You're not getting Skip, you're not getting a vacation during the season. Dennis Rodman went to the Bulls, went to Scotty, went to Phil. But Skip, I love how Phil did it. Phil said, Michael, Dennis got something he want to tell you.
Yeah, because Phil knew Michael wasn't going to take it well. He said, let me be the intermediary here, because the reason why Dennis went to Phil was because Phil played the good parent. Michael played the bad parent or the bad cop. So Dennis ran to Phil, hoping that Phil would be able to smooth it over with Michael.
He's like, Phil said, I'm not telling Michael. I'm going to bring Michael in this office, and you go tell him. And Dennis said, hey, bro, I need a vacation. And Mike already knew. Say, if we let him go, he ain't coming back. And the second of all, Skip, and I know you noticed this too, Michael Jordan has not forgiven the Pistons and Isaiah Thomas because he believes it was Isaiah. Now, Isaiah said it was Bill Laimbeer, says we ain't shaking him, you know what's hand. Michael Jordan believes it was Isaiah. He says, Isaiah, you're the leader of that team. You should have known better. Because, Skip, you remember years before, the Boston Celtics did the exact same thing to the Pistons. And
Right, but here's the thing, and I always say this. Isaiah Thomas has to decide what his story is going to be. What's his alibi? Did you decide to walk off because that's what the Boston Celtics did to you, and supposedly that's what all the great teams did back then? Did you guys do it because Bill Laimbeer came up with it? Did you guys do it because of what Jordan said about the city of Detroit and the Pistons the day before? What's the reason why you did it? Like, come up with a story and stick to it.
I remember it like it was yesterday. They walked off the court. Now, I didn't remember this little minute detail that Aguirre was getting ready to shoot free throws, and all of them empty. I remember DJ, Bird, Parrish.
It wasn't Aguirre, it was Dantley.
All of them left. Isaiah ran and grabbed Kevin McHale.
He did.
Nobody shook hands. And so Isaiah thought that was the way you did it. But even though...
Bullshit. The reason why Isaiah was doing it like that is because he was always jealous of Jordan, and he was bitter at the way his team got swept. They looked down on the Bulls. They had no respect for him whatsoever. And that's why he conducted himself like that.
And I don't... Look, I have a... I just believe Isaiah should have taken the high road. But to this day, Michael Jordan has not forgiven the Pistons, mainly Isaiah, because he says you was the leader. But to Michael's credit, Skip, when they bust his head every 3 years, Skip, he shook everybody's hand. He even did an interview on the court after he lost.
Absolutely. After Game 7 in 1990, and kudos to Shannon for giving Michael Jordan credit for this, where Jordan stood at center court with Pat O'Brien and said Detroit was the better team, they played better than us today, and basically we have to get better. And that's what a man does. All the stuff with Isaiah Thomas, and then it looked worse. See, the difference between what the Celtics did compared to what the Pistons did, and, you know, Isaiah and Stephen A. have tried to make it a racial issue, saying Bird can get away with it because he's white. No, it's because the Celtics basically walked off the court. They didn't walk past the Pistons bench. So just optically, it looked different than the Pistons walking right past the Bulls bench. And then on top of that, Isaiah Thomas puts his head down like he's trying to slink past Jordan. So it's really hurt Isaiah Thomas's career and his legacy more than anybody else's. Because Isaiah Thomas should be recognized today as, without a doubt, arguably one of the top 10 greatest players to ever play in the NBA. But nobody mentions him because of that. Due to that event, he was left off of the Dream Team.
Who does that? Finally got right now, losing the conference finals or losing the NBA finals, that's willing to give you an interview after they lose on the court. The greatest player at that time did that. So he's like, hold on, I got my butt kicked 3 years in a row. I was mad enough to shake everybody's hand. Now we return the favor, and y'all gonna weasel out of here. You heard what Horace Grant said. Horace Grant said
that was hilarious, man. He said they walked out like some straight bitches.
Like some straight up bees. Some straight up bees, that's what they were. And we like, good, go ahead, we kicked your ass.
I agree.
But Skip, listen to Michael talk, Skip, and you listen at his body language and his demeanor, he ain't forgot that. He'll never forgive Isaiah. He'll never forgive Isaiah. And that's one of the reasons, you and I both know, Skip, Isaiah Thomas should have been on that Dream Team. And he wasn't for one simple reason: what transpired before the 91 championship. That's it. No other reason.
Yep. I agree with that. I'll also try to be fair about this before I launch and say that a couple of days before that closeout game of that sweep, Michael had made some comments about the Pistons, the bad boys, were not worthy champions, that they were bad champions because of the way they carried themselves. And remember, they all had...
And basically the entire NBA felt that way. That doesn't mean that it was right for Jordan to say that, because at the end of the day, the Bad Boy Pistons were an all-time great team. They just happened to also be dirty as hell, but they were an all-time great team.
Right. We tried to hurt Michael Jordan. Dennis Rodman just flat out says in the documentary that we tried to physically hurt Michael Jordan. And John Sally, who I know very well, said, you have to get him, you have to hit him before he takes flight because, you know, he's not human. Well, that's what they thought. He's not human. And Isaiah feared him, but obviously signed off on playing football against him because that was the only way they could stop him. And the rules allowed then.
People have to understand this about the Jordan rules, and I may have mentioned this in other videos. You know, there's this confusion about where the Jordan rules came from. They claim that it started in the playoffs in '89 or what have you. It's not true. The Jordan rules actually started from 1984 with Bill Laimbeer, when he grabbed Jordan out of the air and threw him on the ground on his side. Like, the fouls that they showed in that documentary were nothing compared to some of the ways in which Jordan was fouled by the Pistons. For whatever reason, the documentarian left a lot of the real fouls out. And to me, it was because of a lack of real research. That's one of the ways in which the documentary was lacking. He could have conferred with one of these guys on YouTube or IG who come up with these outstanding highlight packages for different players in different eras and gotten far better footage. But either way, in 1987, the Chicago Bulls played the Detroit Pistons in the Silverdome. I think it was in April. Jordan scored 61 points in an overtime victory for the Bulls. The next season in '88 on Easter Sunday, Jordan and the Bulls go up there and Jordan scores 59 points in regulation in another victory for the Bulls on Easter Sunday. That's when Chuck Daly officially decided that they were going to create a new modus operandi in dealing with Jordan. But they've been dirty with him from way before that. But, you know, the official Jordan rule started after those two performances in back-to-back seasons.
For you to play football. The superstars were not protected in those days.
No.
There was no such thing as flopping and trying to draw a call like we see now. There was no fraternizing then quite the way it is now, where everybody's one big happy family. This was blood. And when you challenge Michael like that, when you beat the hell out of him, he's not going to like it and he's not going to get over it. And here's the point. Isaiah never got over it either, because we've had Isaiah on our show. I don't know if you remember this. I think the last time was in 2016.
And I'm happy that Skip Bayless mentioned that, because Isaiah Thomas tries to act as if he's taking this high road. It's like, dude, at every opportunity you've appeared on various sports talk shows and debate shows and gone out of your way to snipe at Jordan. So everybody knows what the deal is.
Ahead of the NBA Finals in Oakland, we had Isaiah on. And he is hard on Michael. He takes shots to this day at Michael. And Michael doesn't like that. And so Michael just flat out called him a, you know what, I can't say the word, it starts with A. And that's what Michael thinks of him. And again, I never got over the fact that the Pistons walked off the floor right in front of Jordan. But I thought it was incredibly humiliating, even to the Pistons, to have to parade off right past Michael Jordan. In a way, it was showing, in a weird way, sort of upside down respect to him, because they were afraid of him.
They were definitely afraid of him. And to Skip's point, that was a way of showing deference. It's almost like, two junkyard dogs fighting. And, the dog that normally has been losing because he's getting ganged up by a pack of dogs finally takes out the pack leader. Like in the film Rise of the Planet of the Apes, there's this great scene where Caesar, he gets locked up in this chimp enclosure, and one of the chimps beats him down. Well, eventually Caesar comes up with a plan to fight the chimp one-on-one and bust him upside the head with like a cast iron metal bell or something like that, and then just beats him down and stands over him. And that other chimp is forced to show obeisance to Caesar. It's the same thing with the Detroit Pistons. They were never a problem again for the Bulls after that. I'm not even quite sure if the Pistons ever defeated the Bulls again after that. After that series, they got swept in '91, and then I think the Bulls swept them in '92 in the regular season.
Of him, and so they tried to disrespect him by not shaking his hand, but in the end, they were saying to him, "Yeah, you got us, and we can't stand it." He knew he got them. He got them once and for all. That was the beginning of the end of the Pistons as we knew them. And yet, he's right. What he said last night, it's just not.
The true official end of the Bad Boy Pistons was in 1992 when they lost to the Knicks in the playoffs. I remember that series very vividly. It was a first-round matchup against Pat Riley's Knicks. And basically, that was real football. They beat the living shit out of each other. Oakley against Rodman, Ewing against Lambeer. Like, they were going to war.
Not sportsmanship. You should go shake the other guy's hand if he beats you straight up. And they got beaten badly. They got beaten straight up. No bad calls. No fluky plays. They got their butts kicked by Michael Jordan and company, and they should have shaken his hand.
Oh, they should have, huh? So make sure you tell Tom Brady that next time he lose a Super Bowl to go over there and shake the opposing quarterback's hand. You make sure you do that.
Hey, yo, Shannon, boy. This dude's like an ex-girlfriend or ex-wife, always bringing up some old shit.
Skip Bayless, I'm glad you said that. I wasn't going to bring that up because you know he's notorious for that, Skip Bayless. But you know what happened, Skip? The Pistons learned that from the Celtics. Because what did the Celtics do to beat the Lakers? They bullied them. And you remember, Skip, it was the Pistons that turned around and bullied the Celtics and beat them. They snatched Bird out of the air. They knocked Parrish and McHale upside their head. So they said, this is the way we can. It was an ugly brand of basketball. And the NBA really didn't like that. And so they were glad when the Bulls beat the Pistons, Skip.
Absolutely. Because the Pistons were never supposed to be there. Once again, it was supposed to be Magic handing the baton to Jordan somewhere around 88 or 89. That's what it was supposed to be. And the Pistons got in the way. So in '91, when it finally happened, that was the official coronation for Michael Jordan.
Because they love the Celtics. They love Larry Bird. But when the Pistons knocked the Celtics out with the style of brand of ball they played, the NBA was like, man, we can't wait for somebody to get you guys up out of here.
But anyway, that's basically it on that, brothers. That was the coverage of episodes 3 and 4 of Michael Jordan's documentary of the 1997-98 Chicago Bulls championship run, The Last Dance. So peace.